Now, what just about any person knows who's read Revelation is that the book raises a lot of questions, especially in the center section from Revelation 6 to 19. There are a lot of questions about what time period this is about, what the purpose of all the judgment is, and many other things as well. So I just want to share up front that this book, which has a lot of similarities with a book like Daniel, I think is dealing primarily with future events from the time of the writing. Now, is it all about the very end, or is it about the whole future from John's perspective, like that would include all of what's going on in these years in between? Is it primarily about what happened in the early centuries? I think that there's good discussion you can have about this. I do think that the kinds of suffering that the people of God go through in the book connects with many times throughout the last 2,000 years where the church has been attacked and suffered, where the blood of the martyrs has been spilt, where people, governments, have sought to kill those who name the name of Jesus. Okay, so I think it connects, and in some sense maybe even describes all of those things. I think this book has much value for us to shape our thinking about the attacks of Satan and his forces, to renew our confidence in Jesus' sovereignty, even when things seem out of control, to increase our hope and our longing for Jesus to come. But I think that at least primarily what these chapters are describing is still future, is a final climactic time of judgment that precedes the coming of the Lord. Although I think there's signs of that, and that similar things happen throughout the history of the church. But throughout this time period that I think is primarily still to come, there are the kinds of judgment that the world has never seen. Millions and millions, rather more like billions of people will face their destruction. I think this is primarily what was being talked about as the great hour of trial, or as Jesus might describe as this time of great tribulation and affliction that would come upon the whole world. On the one hand, the serpent is attacking with fury. He's at work today to thwart the work of God to bring destruction. And Satan exerts major influence in these chapters. On the other hand, God is sovereign over all the events of the chapters. That's why you read Revelation 4 and 5 before. Jesus is the one who opens the seals, who pours out judgment on rebels, who saves those who turn to him, who provides safety and rescue for the saints. On the big scale, if you read the section on your own, you'll find that there are 3 sets of judgment in Revelation 6 through 19. 7 seals, which are broken, 7 bowl judgments, 7 trumpets. These maybe are all happening at the same time, right? Or I'm not even sure sometimes how specifically we're supposed to try to plot how all of this happens. But these are the judgments that are carried out by the Lamb in order to bring the world to its intended finish. But I thought what we could do with a little bit of time is just to examine 2 texts from this center part that give us a feel for what's here. So if you look at the end of Revelation chapter 6, which describes the opening of the 6th seal, you can see what the response is of those who rebel against Jesus. As they call to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who's seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Then in Revelation chapter 7, there's a sealing of 144,000 from Israel for salvation. Some people think that's about Israel. Some people think that's about the church, or both. But what I want to look at is the second half of Revelation chapter 7. Revelation chapter 7, verse 9. After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb." And there's these praises. And then verse 13, and then one of the elders addressed me, saying, "Who are these, clothed in white robes? From where have they come from?" I said, "Sir, you know." He said to me, "These are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." Whether this is talking about all of God's people, which I think it very well may be, or whether this is focused on the people who go through this time of terrible trouble, God will remember mercy, even during this time of great trouble. He'll save an innumerable number of people from all over the earth, and he has been doing this, and he continues to do this, and he will do this all the way to the end. He'll cleanse them through the blood of the Lamb. Even in the time of God's great wrath in Revelation 6-19, we are reminded that the world will see God's great mercy. Against the darkest backdrop, God's beautiful light and mercy will shine at full strength. There's much more that could be said about what will happen. But I want to step back and look at this from another perspective. We look at it from the perspective of God and the Lamb. The Lamb is carrying out these things, even the judgments. But there's another perspective that I think helps us to make sense of the chapters. These chapters also record the attacks of the serpent, Satan, the dragon, and his offspring against the Lamb and against those who follow the Lamb. And I'm not going to explain everything in some of these stories. I don't think I can necessarily. But I think you can get the ideas, and it's worth reading the pictures, reading the stories. Revelation chapter 12, verse 1 is a good example of this. A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with a moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 diadems. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. The dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth. I mean, this is an amazing scene. So that when she bore her child, he might eat it and devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. You say, well, I'm not sure if I understand everything in there, but I think I knew what the dragon is, and I think I knew who that child is. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness. Verse 7, war arose in heaven. Verse 9, the great dragon was thrown down from heaven. That ancient serpent who was called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world, he was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And there's this great praise that comes out because the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down. And so there's this cry, rejoice, O heavens, in verse 12. But woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. Verse 17, then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring. And you could think, well, that sounds like maybe things that already happened, and Satan is waging war on all those who identify with Christ, and that is certainly happening. Or maybe some of this is still focused on something that is future. But in any event, Satan wages war on those who identify with the offspring, with Jesus. This continues the fulfillment of the promises made in the garden. But then you look at the end of the chapter, and it says, and the dragon stood on the sand of the sea. And then some translations may have it that John was standing on the sand of the sea, but there's better evidence that says this is the serpent standing on the sand of the sea. And why does the serpent do it? I think the easiest way to understand it is to go on and read chapter 13. And I saw a beast rising up out of the sea. And there's so much about this beast that is empowered by the devil, who leads in the deceiving of the nations and in the horrible things that happen. And this beast, this powerful figure, which maybe there's signs that this has happened over and over and over. Maybe this is talking about one great beast still to come. But the thing is, this person figure is empowered by Satan to wage war against the people of God. And we experience this conflict throughout the history of the church. But I do think that a lot of this is pointing to the future. That there are things ahead of us that the world has never seen. This passage seems to focus on a final Antichrist figure, a man of lawlessness, as Paul may describe, who will deceive the nations and wage war against the people of God. And this is the feel. I'm just trying to get us to get a feel for what's in Revelation 6 and 19, which I think primarily describes what is still in front of us. But what you always have to remember in the midst of all of the judgment and all of the chaos and all of the waging war against the people of God, you have to remember the throne room of God in Revelation 4 and 5. God is on the throne, and the Lamb is the one who is carrying out all that needs to happen to bring the world to its intended finish. The attacks of the serpent, which are ongoing today and will continue through the end of this age, finally come to their culmination in Revelation chapter 19, when the entire world that's following the beast joins together to wage war on the Lamb and those who follow the Lamb. It is like Psalm 2, where the kings of the earth set themselves against Yahweh and against his Christ, saying, let's throw off their chains once and for all. Let's burst their bonds asunder. The time comes in Revelation 19, and the Lamb breaks forth out of heaven to lead his people into the climactic cosmic battle. Revelation 19, verse 11. Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and the one sitting on it was called Faithful and True. And in righteousness he judges and makes war, and his eyes are like a flame of fire. We've seen these descriptions. Verse 13, he is clothed in a robe dipped in blood. The name by which he is called is the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, were following him on white horses. And from his mouth comes a sharp sword, with which to strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. Verse 16, on his robe and on his thigh is a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Then an angel comes and cries out to the birds, come gather for the great supper of God, to eat the flesh of kings and captains and mighty men. Verse 19, and I saw the beast and the kings of the earth with their armies, gathered to make war against him, who is sitting on the horse, and against his army. The beast was captured, with it the false prophet that was with him, those who worshipped him. They were thrown alive into the lake of fire. Verse 21, and the rest were slain by the sword that comes from the mouth of him who was sitting on the horse. I think we read one of the most seemingly anticlimactic accounts that I can remember in the Bible. Everything is set up for this climactic battle, and it seems like it's hardly even a battle. And I think that is the point. The irony of this climactic battle being so anticlimactic is perhaps one of the greatest demonstrations in the Bible that Jesus is the unparalleled, matchless King of Kings and Lord of Lords. One word from Jesus, and the battle is over. Like Martin Luther wrote many years ago, the Prince of Darkness grim, we tremble not for him. His rage we can endure, for lo, his doom is sure. One little word shall fell him.